thought and sustained thought. It also says that applied thought and sustained thought have 7 discriminations, that is, those things, having characteristics, etc. The Abhidharmasamukhavayakya repeats that spontaneous discrimination means the 5 consciousnesses. There is an interpretation that applied thought and sustained thought are only associated with mental consciousness, because the Yogacarabhimi Sastra says that the dharmas of applied thought and sustained thought, etc., are all uncommon dharmas of mental consciousness. It also says that applied thought and sustained thought are associated with sorrow and joy, and because they have never been said to be associated with happiness and suffering. There is no reason for indifference, which is universal, to be mentioned, but why does that treatise not say that applied and sustained thought are associated with happiness and suffering? Although there is happiness in the realm of manas during the first trance state, dhyana, still it is not separate from joy, and it is generally referred to by the name of joy. Although there is suffering in the realm of manas in places of unadulterated suffering, still it resembles sorrow and is generally referred to as sorrow. Although the Yogacarabhimi Sastra says that alid thought and sustained thought have names, etc., and their meanings as objects, the 5 consciousnesses themselves do not have names, etc., and their meanings as objects. However, when it says that the 5 consciousnesses have applied thought and sustained thought, it indicates that many consciousnesses originate from these, too, not that they are associated.
The expression of the Abhidharmasamukhavayakya, spontaneous discrimination, refers to the 5 consciousnesses, differs from the interpretation of the Yogacarabhimi Sastra. That first text says that spontaneous discrimination is the same as the 5 consciousnesses, while the Yogacarabhimi Sastra says that this spontaneous discrimination is applied thought and sustained thought associated with discriminating mental consciousness occurring with the 5 consciousnesses. Therefore, the evidence that these texts quote is inconclusive. Consequently, the 5 consciousnesses definitely do not have applied thought and sustained thought.
48. Association with 5 feelings. There is an interpretation that remorse is associated with sorrow and indifference, because it evolves as painful activity and is found as indeterminate. Sloth occurs with feelings of joy, sorrow, and indifference, because its activity usually evolves as agreeable, disagreeable, or neither. Applied thought and sustained thought are associated with sorrow, joy, indifference, and happiness, because in the first trance state, manas is associated with happiness. There is an interpretation that these 4 indeterminate mental activities also occur with the feeling of suffering, because manas is associated with suffering in destinies of unadulterated suffering.
49. Mental activities with specific objects. All 4 may occur with the 5 mental activities with specific objects, because their modes of activities and objects are not mutually contradictory. 50. Association with good mental activities. Remorse and sloth may only occur with 10 good mental activities, because they exist only in the realm of desire and are devoid of serenity. Alid thought and sustained thought may occur with all 11 good mental activities, because in the first trance state, they are associated with serenity.
51. Association with the passions. Remorse may only be associated with ignorance, because its mode of activity is gross, and craving, etc., are subtle. Sloth, applied thought, and sustained thought are associated with the 10 passions, because there is no mutual contradiction in the development of these indeterminates and those passions. 52. Association with secondary passions. Remorse may occur with the medium and large secondary passions, but not with the 10 beginning with anger, because they are sovereign. Sloth and applied thought and sustained thought may occur with all 20 secondary passions, because in states of sloth, etc., all may generate them.
53. Moral species. These 4 all pervade the 3 natures of good, etc., because one also repents indeterminate actions. There is an interpretation that the first 2, i.e., remorse and sloth, involve only good acquired at birth, because their modes of activity are, respectively, gross and dull. The latter 2 are also categorized as the good of added effort, prayogika, because applied thought and sustained thought exist in that which is achieved through hearing, etc. There is an interpretation that the first two also involve the good of added effort, because remorse and sloth exist in states of hearing and volition.
The last three are common to the defiled indeterminate and the pure indeterminate. Remorse is not defiled because its understanding is gross and violent. Among the four varieties of the category of indeterminate, remorse is included in only the middle two, because its mode of activity is gross and violent and not the fruit of samadhi. Sloth is excluded from the fourth variety of indeterminate, because it is not born of samadhi, and a mind born of retribution can acquire it. Applied thought and sustained thought are excluded from the first variety, because its understanding is very feeble and it is unable to investigate words, meanings, etc.
54. Indeterminate mental activities and the realms. Remorse and sloth exist only in the realm of desire. Applied thought and sustained thought exist in the realm of desire in the first trance state, because dharmas of the remaining realms and stages are wonderfully calm. Remorse and sloth must not appear in one born above, in a superior realm, and applied thought and sustained thought of the upper realms occurs as that of a lower realm and can generate those of the upper realms in a lower one. The applied thought and sustained thought of lower and upper stages can have as objects the upper and lower stages, respectively.
There is an interpretation that remorse and sloth cannot have as an object the upper stages, because their modes of activity are gross and direct, in the case of remorse, and extremely dull, in the case of sloth. There is an interpretation that these two also have as an object the upper object, because someone with false views can regret having cultivated samadhi, and a dream can in all cases have as an object something already experienced.
55. Indeterminate mental activities and categories of learners. Remorse excludes post-learners, because they have left desires and are indifferent. Remorse, sloth, allayed thought, and sustained thought are all common to the three classes of learners, because all conditioned, samskrita, good dharmas of one who seeks liberation are called learners, and because the conditioned good dharmas of one whose learning has culminated are all post-learners.
56. Elimination. Remorse and sloth are to be eliminated only by the paths of insight and cultivation, because they also originate through the power of wrong views, etc. They are not directly attracted and generated by the pure paths, and, unlike sorrow, they do not deeply seek liberation. If it is to be called not to be eliminated, ahiya, because it has already been eliminated, then the sloth of a post-learner is categorized as not to be eliminated. Even though applied thought and sustained thought are not the true, pure path, still they are able to attract it and be born from it. Therefore, they are common to both insight and cultivation and categorized as not to be eliminated. As for the interpretation that applied thought and sustained thought are not to be eliminated, this is because they are categorized as being only discrimination among the five dharmas, and the Yogacarabhimi Sastra says that they are discrimination.
There is an interpretation that these, jhātar, too, are also categorized as correct knowledge, samyagnyana, because it is said that correct reflection is pure, because it can cause the mind to seek, and because it is said that it causes speech. In the penultimate state, one is unable to have universal knowledge of medicines, illnesses, etc., and must depend on conventional applied thought and sustained thought during the state of subsequently acquired knowledge, prasthulabdhijnana, in order to preach the Dharma to others. It is not like the effortless preaching in the stage of Buddhahood. Therefore these two varieties of thought also pervade the category of purity.
Even though it is said that allayed thought and sustained thought must be discrimination, it is not said definitely that they belong to only the third category among the five dharmas, because there is discrimination in subsequently acquired correct knowledge. Other topics, concerning the four indeterminates, can be understood by analogy with the above through the use of reason.
57. Mental activities and mind. Do these six kinds of dharmas or mental activities li, good, passions, universal, etc., have a separate self-nature apart from mind? Are they distinctions of states of mind? What are the errors of affirming these? There are errors in affirming both of these above positions. If they have self-natures apart from mind, how can the holy teaching say that there is only consciousness? Or how could they say that mind alone goes a long way, or that defilement and purity result from mind, or that the person is the six elements? how can the explanation of the Mahayana Citralamkara be grasped? A verse, in this text, says,
"We affirm that mind appears twofold. In the same way, it appears as craving, etc. Or else it appears as faith, etc. And there are no separate defiled or good dharmas. If, on the other hand, they are distinctions of states of mind, how can the holy teachings speak of associates of mind, because is not something associated with another nature a nature of its own? Also, how can the Larakavatara Sutra say that when mind and